Welcome to the continuation of the Virtual Lead Marketing Conference, which focuses on loyalty, engagement, analytics, and digital applications. I'm your host, John Karolowski. Thank you for joining us. We have 4 more presentations today on topics such as trade management, shopper engagement, virtual research, and more. You can stay with us the rest of the day or just log in to those sessions that interest you. Now, this conference is interactive. If you have questions, type them in the chat box in the lower left of your screen. We encourage questions in the presentation. We'll answer them along the way and at the end of the presentation as time allows. Now, between each presentation, there will be a CPG and retail trivia quiz for valuable prizes, including the grand prize of a Fitbit, the fitness monitor, the popular wearable technology that you see promoted and advertised everywhere these days. Our next presentation is Revolutionizing Trade Management with Customer Business Planning. Our speakers are Mark Osborn and Colby Sheridan of SAP. Gentlemen, take it away.
Well, thanks, John. This is Mark Osborn, and I'll start the presentation today. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to present to the audience during the conference sessions today. I think that the opportunity in consumer products really starts with this unprecedented wave of change that we see the industry going through. And it started with really the shift in power, with brands rising in power in the 1940s and 1950s through the 1970s, and CP companies developing operating models that were focused primarily on advertising and building brand awareness to cultivate brand loyalty. And then beginning in the 1970s, we saw that power shift more to retailers as retailers grew in scope and size. And with that power shift, we saw new promotion models being developed to entice consumers to visit retail stores and to promote purchase frequency and store loyalty. And that retailer power was further driven by the application of new technologies that enabled retailers to really focus on streamlining their efforts around things like inventory optimization or logistics management and the application of POS data to understand some of the more detailed information around shopper loyalty. And now that power is shifting again, and this time directly to consumers themselves. We see with the advent of access to the internet and mobile technologies and the proliferation of new non-traditional channels, consumers today have unprecedented access to information just about anywhere they find themselves, anywhere in the world. And they can use that information to make purchase decisions anytime, anywhere, and from anyone. And while that's creating great opportunities for consumers, it's also putting a tremendous amount of pressure on the industry, creating both enormous complexity and enormous cost. And this is a diagram that we like to show that just demonstrates the growth in network complexity since 2009, just since 2009. In that period, the growth in the number of new products that have been introduced into the consumer market or consumer product space has grown by 170%. And in that same time period, 85% of those products have since been discontinued, which leaves a net increase in the number of products now available in the market of 30%, 30% increase since 2009. Yet during that same time period, in the aggregate, the industry revenue has only grown by 2%, which means that the corresponding cost per item has declined by 22%. So obviously this is not sustainable, and this translates not only to cost and complexity for research and development as companies invest in these product innovations to try to personalize and reach increasingly refined segments of consumers, but it also translates into costs that are pervasive across the organization, like sourcing of commodities and raw materials and packaging, or manufacturing costs for production setups and capacity utilization. Supply chain costs, introducing more SKUs into the mix increases your forecast error rates, drives up inventory complexity, and increases the risk of obsolescence. And then finally, also sales and marketing costs as consumer products companies look to define products that are viable for increasingly refined segments of consumers and for opportunities to develop channel-specific programs that they can then apply across all these different channels that are proliferating these days within the industry. And it's this last piece that we want to focus on today. These sales and marketing costs are really driving a whole new wave of complexity within the context of consumer products companies. So considering the rise of the consumer, This complexity is particularly acute, and it now requires consumer products companies to manage expectations and needs across multiple market dimensions, including traditional retail, but obviously, as I mentioned, growing virtual commerce channels and increasingly directly to consumers themselves. And each of these dimensions has differing needs and perspectives and objectives. So for CP companies that are looking to drive both top and bottom line growth, the primary question is, what's my ROI for all these investments that I'm making across all these different channels? And then based on that ROI, who are my most valuable customers, and increasingly, who are my most valuable consumers? What do I know about them? How can I leverage ever-increasing volumes of consumer data to better understand their needs and preferences, and then improve my segmentation and reach, and even further drive that ROI that I'm shooting for? But at the same time, retailers and other commerce channels are simultaneously putting pressure on those same CP companies to deliver comprehensive plans that align to their specific brand objectives. And those objectives may not always align with the CP company's own objectives. And those objectives might be to improve shopper loyalty, to increase basket size, and to drive overall category growth. And then in the midst of all this, we have the consumer, who's really now in the driver's seat, and they're asking themselves perhaps the most challenging questions. Why do I even need a relationship with a particular brand or with a particular retailer? And if I can't define that for myself, why would I even need to share information with them? So the opportunity for consumer products companies today to become increasingly smart and increasingly targeted in the way that they're reaching consumers and working with retailers as part of that effort is of paramount concern. And that's going to be the focus of our conversation today. And so with that, I will hand it off to my colleague, Colby Sheridan, who will take you through the rest of the challenge.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it, and certainly appreciate everyone's time and attention today. That's a great backdrop to what's happening in the industry. And to Mark's point, if we shine a light on trade management, it really hasn't changed in a number of years. And saying that it leaves a lot of room for opportunity is respectfully really kind of putting it nicely. If you look across the landscape, many consumer products companies are still using spreadsheets to build account plans and promotions. And while we all know and love Excel for many purposes, building a trade strategy is maybe not its strength, because it creates a lot of challenges and issues, version control issues. They're desktop databases that are not integrated. They often have out-of-date information really as soon as they're completed. In an annual plan, there's a rush to a deadline, a flurry of activity to support it, and then often those plans are then stuck on a shelf and collect dust and never to be seen again. And then really forget trying to align these to customer plans or customer objectives or company objectives rather from an enterprise scale, because the roll-up is so difficult because they're in these various Excel spreadsheets. So Excel creates a lot of challenge, yet many companies still use it as their trade management solution today. And then those companies that do have an integrated trade management system, they're implemented often just as a checkbook to ensure that they haven't overspent, that they're in check with their funds, and that they don't have to need to have an uncomfortable conversation with their boss. Problem is most data is internal, inward looking, and rarely are they able to merge to external views because it creates a lot of difficulty. And then as Mark also mentioned, the whole explosion of consumer data, it's just created a whole other host of challenges and also opportunities if we look at it at a positive perspective, that once you are able to harness that consumer information, your insights then obviously get much more clear, and you get to develop much more actionable information. But even in this day, the promotions are not consistently analyzed. You might look at it from a volume perspective. Did I get my case volume objectives met? Yes, but doing it from a profitable perspective, well, that's a whole other conversation, a whole other challenge to really get to. And then finally, often we see companies just around the globe who are just copying promotions from last year and redoing the same promotions. Maybe because it's easy, maybe because they're comfortable doing so. I'm not sure quite the reason. Maybe there are many, but this creates a challenge. And I even know of customers who have completely deleted or removed that copy button to force the account managers into the role of creating a new promotion. But creating these promotions creates a real problem. Because if we really go a step further and look at some challenges, I'll draw your attention. I'll go ahead and give you the answer that average promotion is down negative 19%. It's not down just a little, it's down a lot. This is for the manufacturer, and so just repeating the promotions that you did last year are simply not an answer. And then from a retailer perspective too, they're expecting manufacturer support for not just their revenue targets or their volume targets, but also their profitability targets. They're also looking to their consumer products partners for advice for their own business. Now, this was the case, back 20 plus 30 years ago or so in the industry, and it's still the case today. Retailers are still looking to the manufacturers for advice on how to run their business. Retailers are also demanding that these business plans be tailored to the retailer himself. And in some cases, the larger retailers, and especially coming from manufacturers that have a wide portfolio of products, they're asking for these business plans to be tailored to the buyers themselves in their own vernacular, in their own KPIs, so that they can assess from an apples-to-apples comparison one plan versus their own plan. And then finally, retailers are also expecting that these promotions are coordinated with the the marketing events as well, because they realize that if you align to those marketing campaigns, they provide a certain air cover and the overall efficacy of the entire plan goes up. So that's always key that you must do. So with that as a backdrop, what happens is not overcoming these barriers creates additional challenges as well. Now, as Mark articulated, the consumer in this day and age is really in the driver's seat. They've never been more educated from their buying decisions and have more information just at a tap of a finger to be able to get to and help hone their purchasing decisions. And so what happens is, still just in this day and age, we have a tremendous amount of lost out of stocks due to products being off the shelf. That's not new news. And even beyond that, from a brand substitution perspective, 82% in one study, 82% of consumers were willing to switch from an out-of-stock brand. So brand loyalty, as a concept, has just gone completely out the window. As Mark also mentioned, 75% of products fail after launch. And then finally, the consumer is price sensitive. 52%, over half, will go to a new product and just because of a better price. So loyalty for a brand is something that's something that we just really don't see anymore. So if this is sounding familiar, it's because this is really the topic of joint business planning or collaborative business planning, right? And that's not a new concept. That's been around for some time. The interesting thing is I was just at a Promotion Optimization Institute conference last week, and in every single breakout session that I attended, people were talking about joint business planning. So this is a need that is as big as it ever has been. It's a challenge as it ever has been because the rise of the consumer, this need for personalization and creating these customer plans, but with this exploding amount of data is making it more and more difficult to do. So if trade management should enable collaborative business planning, what does that really mean? Well, that means giving the ability to create business plans, again, tailored not just for that retailer, but also possibly for individual buyers in their language with their KPIs based upon their product hierarchies, not necessarily how you as a manufacturer might look at your product hierarchies, but those need to be aligned so you can have a comparative view with that retailer. And this obviously creates a win-win opportunity, right? Because you can have a collaborative discussion and elevate the discussion, past being just a customer, but also to a partner to incorporate both the manufacturer and the customer's perspectives into this. And then we're also talking about being able to leverage optimization capabilities because trade funds for most companies are not growing. If they're growing ever so slightly. And so maximizing those precious trade funds is still just as critical as ever. And then finally, you must have the ability to measure the effectiveness of the plan, not just after the fact, but during the plan itself. And again, not just from a volume or a dollar perspective or a euro perspective or whatever your currency might be, but also from a profitability perspective and also look at it from, again, your internal perspective with your internal data, but also be able to leverage external data as well for as complete a picture as possible, going across shipments, looking at consumption, point of sale information, even structured and unstructured data as well.
Colby, we just had a question pop up in our chat box that pertains to what you're talking about. Considering how important trade management is in consumer products, why do we still see Excel-based and checkbook approaches to TPM?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's probably easy. I think there's a certain comfort level with users still in Excel. There's obviously a huge degree of flexibility that they can slice and dice the numbers to create a view and a perspective that they like and that gives them some comfort when they're managing their business. So there's a number of reasons. And also, let's be honest, it's cheap, it's economical. So Excel is still prevalent, but as much money as consumer products firms are spending on trade, it's the number 2 line item on average, second only cost of goods sold. It's approaching 20–25% of revenue. As much money as they spend, having an integrated system in place that generates only a small percentage of returns can mean big dollars or big euro back to pay for that solution very, very quickly, just if you move the needle just a little bit. So great question about Excel. So if we talk about collaborative business planning from a benefits perspective, both from a tangible and indirect perspective, they're very clear. They're crystal clear, in fact. So from a tangible perspective, you're talking about consistent success criteria that you can measure together with the retailer, and again, elevate that conversation you have with that retailer. Allows the users to be able to retrieve key information quickly and analyze it and make decisions in the moment, not necessarily after the fact, but in the moment, again, and with a consistent perspective. It's obviously integrated with that retailer view, so you're comparing apples to apples. And from an indirect perspective, I think the one that bubbles up to the top for me is this increased level of trust, right? You're looking at it from a partner perspective, and you're able to look at it from a joint development perspective with that retailer as well. And you can pull in past learnings, and then finally shift from a reconciliation perspective and a reconciliation sort of a relationship to one that's strategic and be able to analyze your data and your business and make more strategic, profitable, long-term decisions. So if that's the lay of the land, what we're really talking about is revolutionizing trade management. So we all know the acronym Trade Promotion Management, TPM, but we've recast it as Think, Plan, Manage. What does that mean? That means managing the overall process to drive decisions that balance the non-promotional activities you have with your business and the promotional activities as well. It's also allowing that account manager to impact volume and margin, again, internally as well as a retailer's perspective when they're planning. And again, it's that margin piece that's so important. It's pretty easy for most companies to get to obviously their volume piece. They know what their shipments are. But understanding true margin is sometimes a little more difficult. And then finally, it's that active shift from executing individual promotions and the semblance of a plan, if they're lucky, to more profitable promotions and more strategic promotions that are going to grow their business long term, grow the retailer's category, and increase consumer loyalty. So if we look at that from a process perspective, so I'm going to try to use the arrows here and point to where I'm looking here. So hopefully you can see my green arrow. That starts with bringing in those marketing strategies that we talked about earlier. That's where my campaign's going to be. When are they going to be running? How can I leverage them? That air cover that they're going to be generating. Then we create do our sales planning and budgeting. Finally, create our customer plans, which are made up of our promotional plans. Execute and settle. All along the way, we're using predictive analytics and embedded reporting to rejigger each of these plans, to recalculate each of these plans in the moment, not after the fact, but really live, and so we can make better decisions all along the way. We're using actual data. Some examples are listed below. So, shipments and consumption are sometimes the easy ones, but you may be leveraging distributor information for our indirect customers, using market research data, even unstructured information like sensor data or geographic data to pull in to really make overall better decisions about the entire plan. And then if we're making our plans and we're really aligned from an enterprise perspective, we can then reference these plans and make sure they're aligned to headquarters. So I know that my CEO told Wall Street that we're going to grow our business by 3%. Well, now I have my plans actually aligned properly to those targets and know how those are going to roll up from either a top-down or a bottom-up perspective. And then finally, all of these plans are baked into, my trade plan is baked into my integrated business planning perspective. And so from a sales operations planning perspective, they know what the demand is going to be. Financial planning perspective, they know what I'm going to be spending, and the overall enterprise is making better decisions. The last piece of this is what we would call wraparound optimization. So sometimes some companies talk about optimization as only being one part of the process, or optimizing one promotion or maybe a handful of promotions across a small time period. What we're talking about is literally leveraging those same regression models along the entire process to recalculate plans based on predictive analytics to see, okay, at the customer plan level, what happens if I tweak this certain level of my plan or this one KPI. I can recalculate my entire plan and predict exactly what's going to happen to my uplift or to my demand, all within the tool itself. So that's what we're talking about when we mention revolutionizing trade management. From a data perspective, why would you want to go through the effort of bringing in both internal and external information, right? So the real benefit is not just in one part of the trade management process, but literally across the board. It's things like being able to enable more effective sell-in and sell-out analysis to anticipate forward buy. Or it's reduction of those out-of-stocks that we mentioned up front that are as much of an issue today as they ever have been. So if you've got live information coming from the stores, or maybe live information coming from your point of sale information or your syndicated data information, you can make course corrections and react in the moment, not after the fact, not 6 weeks later when it's too late. We're talking about being able to course correct in the moment when the promotion is still in play because you have such a live feed. Or it's finally, arguably one of the most important things is the one at the bottom. It's enhanced post-event analysis, leveraging both internal as well as third-party data. So what promotions were really effective, which promotions should I really learn from and pull back into my strategy, and which promotions were a complete waste of money. It's leveraging both internal and external data streams to understand those. Net result, increased forecast accuracy, leveraging retailer insights, and finally increasing incremental revenue and margin, which is really the whole message that we're trying to get to here. So, sorry, I clicked forward too. So what does a solution like this look like? So we just gave you one example. We're really more about educating today than selling, but what we're really trying to underscore here is the evolution away from individual reports. I know some of the biggest CP firms on the planet that have hundreds, if not thousands, reports across their enterprise, and how they can make sense of that is just mind-boggling to me. So it's not about more reports. It's about having embedded analytics on the screens where the users are actually doing their work. It's the ability to look at a dashboard and quickly assess, are things improving, are things declining, what are the key drivers for it? If I can't see the key drivers for that, they should be a click or two away. That's what we're talking about with something like embedded analytics that create dynamic charts, provide a very high-level retail overview of things like targets, your budgets, whatever you need, whatever you need on this first screen. And then we can obviously get to much more richer analytics and detailed reports if necessary, but it's more about intelligent uses of data visualization, again, embedded in the screens that we're doing our work, that really make the users much more efficient. So kind of, a little bit of a summary slide tying it together. So what we're talking about when we say, customer business planning, it's the merging of, first off, having the trade solution fully integrated into the rest of the enterprise, leveraging the enhanced visibility that comes with having unstructured and structured data, internal, external data all together. Then it's the ability to create shared insights from a collaborative business process planning perspective with that retailer that generates much more profitable business plans. This is not about making a revenue number or a volume, a case number. This is about actually creating plans that are more profitable. So that's what we mean when we really talk about revolutionizing trade management. And to talk about it, even more detail, each of these points we could have a little fun with and actually spend, the rest of the time talking about just one of these. But revolutionizing trade management to us means things like out-of-stock reductions due to better planning, or a focus on the return on the investment that you're making with an enhanced view of clarity. It's looking at things like total volume across both your promoted and non-promoted, baseline and uplift, all together in a holistic fashion. It's about integrating your trade management strategy to your integrated business planning strategy across the enterprise, so that the supply chain knows what you're going to be doing with trade, and finance knows what you're going to be spending, and vice versa. It's optimization at every stage along the way. Optimization is not about being the icing on the cake. Optimization really is meant to be the cake itself. And finally, no more excuses. We've been doing this long enough as an industry, and wasting a tremendous amount, and it seems like report after report after report comes out in studies saying that trade is inefficient, trade is a waste of money, but there's tools and technology and capabilities that are available today that can really shine a light on that and create opportunities for more profitable manners for managing your business. So with that, Mark and I thank you very much. Mark, if there's anything you'd like to add, please do so. But regardless, we can certainly open it up for questions.
Okay, we've had a series of questions come in. That was a lot of great information in a short period of time. I had difficulty jumping in with these questions in the chat box, but I will have the opportunity to do so now. And the first question is, are external data sources like syndicated and POS data required to enable the collaborative planning and optimization processes you're describing here, or can companies achieve comparable results without this data?
Well, I can certainly take a stab at that, Mark. If you'd like to contribute, you may. I think it's a little bit of a question or perspective, rather, of the more the better. So if a company does have access to these different data types, they can certainly create a better visibility to what's happening with their products in the marketplace itself. And it also doesn't have to be a case where you must have, as an example, complete point-of-sale data across your entire universe of customers and retailers, when I say customers in this case, to be functional. So what we can certainly do is leverage the best data types for each of your retailers, and then even going that far, you're able to create much better decisions just having that extra layer of clarity that data can certainly bring to the table.
Okay. And here's a question, Mark, about some of the information you provided in the beginning. You talked about a shift of power to consumers, growing industry complexity, declining promotion ROI, and other factors facing CP companies today. What's different now that's forcing a need for change?
Well, I think it goes back to the chart that I showed, just provides a really tangible example. The growth in complexity and the growth in the associated costs associated with doing things the way that we've done them is not sustainable. There's just simply too many variables and too many interdependencies between the different aspects of the business and the different channels that we're trying to serve. And all of these create separate cost drivers. And there's just too much at stake, your brand, your volume, your revenue, your growth. So what got you here won't get you there. The time is now to think very differently about how to approach these things. You have to think in terms of optimizing all volume across all channels, and in a way that's tailored to the plans of your retailers, your channels, and even the consumers that you're trying to reach directly. And you have to be able to come back and demonstrate the effectiveness of those plans. And so you need these capabilities in order to be able to show that the proposals that you're putting in place are actually working and driving the right results for both you and the other parties that you're trying to serve. And there's also this notion of transparency. I mean, Colby mentioned this a number of times in the material he was reviewing. There's a huge amount of interdependency that exists between not only the sales organization and the marketing teams, but other groups within the organization like finance and supply chain and manufacturing. And so a change in one area has a material effect on changes in other areas, and the need to have visibility to that change and the implications of that change is really acute. And then finally, and this is one that sort of really never really gets mentioned overtly, but there's also a huge amount of risk mitigation that's required here, both financial and regulatory risk. You think of the material impact of trade promotions, just as an example, on your financials as an organization. The ability to demonstrate that you have the appropriate financial controls in place and that is pervasive across the organization is another key benefit of being able to work with systems like these, but also a key driver of the need.
Okay, one more question. We're all familiar with promotion planning, but you're also talking about planning for non-promoted volume as well. Why is this combined view so critical for account managers and sales leaders?
Yeah, great question. I think it goes back to being able just understanding that baseline volume is a major determinant of volume and total volume in general, and you must get your baseline right before you can then actually layer your incremental volume on top of that. And there's many factors of that baseline that come into play that need to be cleanly delineated and understood before you can then layer on your incremental volume on top of that. And companies that are effectively able to decompose the volume between those two can make better decisions, because the levers that you pull to affect both your promoted volume as well as your non-promoted volume are different. And many customers separate those out from a funding perspective, and that's good and bad. It creates flexibilities, but also some complexities. But regardless how you fund it, those levers are different. And understanding how to affect both your baseline versus your incremental volume is key. And understanding that, and from a total volume perspective, again, you're able to make much better decisions because you have much more clarity on exactly how you're going to make your plans and your targets.
Excellent. Okay, thank you both. If there are any more questions out there, you can email them to Mark Osborn at mark.osborn@sap.com. Again, thank you both.